What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2008 Mini Cooper S R56. Today on the Cooper behind me, we're going to be covering how to reseal your oil pan. It's a pretty common leak point on the N14s as well as the N12 engines. The process is going to be the same for both. You can do it one of two ways. You can do the traditional method using a gasket, which is available on fcpro.com, or you can do the method that we're going to do today, which is using some ultra black RTV to seal up the pan. We're going to let it cure overnight, which is the one caveat with this. We're going to let it sit for a whole 24 hours before we put oil back in the engine and run it. So if you have the time to spend to do that, I would almost recommend using that. But let me know in the comments what you've done on your N12 or N14. Do you reseal it using gasket maker, or do you use the gasket? I'm curious to know. With that, we also have some fresh oil, which we just picked up in oil change kit, which is also available on the site, which includes the oil, the filter, the drain plug, washer, and the O-ring for the oil filter housing cap. You can also replace your drain plug while you're at this with a new L-ring unit that also includes a new crush washer if you want a nice new shiny plug. Maybe you repaint the oil pan, you know, who knows how much time you're investing in this. And lastly, I recommend you always pick up a new exhaust clamp. Depending on where you live, sometimes these can corrode pretty nasty and they get a little bit difficult to remove, or the bolts break, or you have to cut them off. So never hurts to have one as insurance. But with that, before we get started on this DIY, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. For this job, we're going to be using an 8mm socket. We have two, both a deep one and a shallow one with a small swivel. That's going to be for the harder to reach bolt under the downpipe. We have our 8mm hex, a 16mm socket. We have a 27mm socket, only if you're going to be changing the oil filter while you do this, which you might as well do an oil change while you're at it. We have a 8-inch extension for the 1/4-inch sockets, and then a 5-inch extension for our 27mm socket so we can get to our oil filter. We have a 1/2-inch ratchet that we're going to be using with that, also a 1/4-inch ratchet, as well as a torque wrench. CTA 8062 is going to be super helpful for removing the exhaust hangers when we go to drop down the exhaust. Plastic scrape tool, we have a flathead screwdriver, electric ratchet. We also have some brake clean. We'll use some shop towels in conjunction with some safety glasses, which is very important, especially when you're under the car. And we're going to try out this Mercedes chemical. It's basically a dissolvent for rubber gaskets. So basically, most new Mercedes have a glued-on oil pan. Even though ours is not that same material, it has RTV most likely, as it's probably been done before. It should still soften up that RTV a little bit. So we're going to test it, see how it works on that. And then with that, a catch pan for the oil, of course. Let's go ahead and get started on this DIY, my good people. All right, my good people, the first thing we're going to do to get started on the oil pan reseal is going to be obviously draining the oil. For us today, we're going to go ahead and pop the oil fill cap off just to break the vacuum seal and allow the oil to free nice and easily. One thing to remember is if you're doing this at home and you just drove the car, things are going to be a little bit hot. Be careful when you drain the oil. Be careful when you're by the exhaust, which we'll be touching in just a little bit. So just a few things to consider if you're going to do this at home. Maybe you let it cool down just a little bit before you drain, or if you have all the time in the world, just let it drain forever, which is what we're going to do today. And then we'll plug the drain plug back up. If you're also going to be doing an oil change, we've covered that in a DIY already, but you know the good deed. We're going to do our 27mm socket underneath the coolant reservoir, get that oil filter out, and that'll just be one more thing that we can drain at the same time. For those of you with the N12, you already know that the oil filter housing is a little bit easier to get to. You don't have to remove the expansion tank like we do on the S model. So we're going to get that filter out, and then we'll pick it back up underneath the car and start removing some stuff. All right, first things first is we're going to drain the oil under here. If your car still has a factory shield, good on you, my good people, get that out of the way. I have not seen one of these with one yet, so I can't even tell you how to take it off. But from there, we have an 8mm hex to get the drain plug off. We're going to go ahead and do that now. Just make sure your hex bit is seated all the way in the plug. You can go ahead and break it free. We're just going to let this baby drain for a little while. While it's draining, we're going to work on removing the exhaust at the same time. So on this car, my good people, the exhaust clamp is usually a 16mm nut on the clamp. You have two hangers down here by the subframe, which Both of the hangers on this car are completely torn. So right now the only thing holding the exhaust up front is that clamp. So we're gonna have to be very mindful of that. And then going straight back on the S models, you have 2 more hangers. Same thing on the non-S, just the non-S, the exhaust curves over to the passenger side. On this one, it goes straight back. So straightforward, we're gonna grab those pliers we showed you earlier, get that hanger situation off. We might use a screw jack to support this exhaust while these hangers are not doing anything, and we undo the clamp. And then we'll get some new hangers, and we'll link them down below in case your car needs new hangers too. While we let this oil drip, we're gonna work on the 16 mil that holds that exhaust clamp shut. We're gonna try it with the electric ratchet after we break it free with the regular ratchet first. We have our screw jack situated back here only because these hangers are not doing anything anymore. So we don't want the exhaust to fall or put some weird strain on the rest of it. Oh, that's nice and loose. So that should be no problem. I'm gonna grab a flathead screwdriver or something to pry this open. We can take that off after. Now let's head to the back and get the 2 rear hangers off, and we'll show you how to use that CTA tool, which I so much love. Now we're gonna go ahead and undo the hangers on the back side. Don't mind the custom Fast and Furious exhaust and the exhaust hanger situation here. However, this tool will still work. It'll help us here up top. We're gonna take it, get the back side over here, and then the front side just helps push the bushing through. We're gonna do the same thing to the other side. And then I have a second set of hands. I have my good friend Mike behind the camera here. He's gonna help me grab this as it comes out, and we'll just go ahead and set it on the side. All right, with the exhaust off, my good people, we're gonna head back to the front, plug up the drain plug, and work on removing some oil pan bolts. All right, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall our drain plug, new crush washer. Make sure the old crush washer came off. You can see it here. Our old one's still on there. If we left that, that would cause a serious leak, which we are trying to avoid. So let's get that baby off, no problem. And we're gonna go ahead and grab our 8 mil and our torque wrench and snug that up to 30 Newton meters. All right. With that nice and snugged up, we have a ton of 8 mil bolts to remove. So let's get our tools ready and we'll go ahead and start zapping off this oil pan. We have 16 8 mil bolts to remove all around the oil pan. I'm gonna start with the one up above our exhaust manifold, which is typically the trickier one. On the N12, it may be a little bit harder to get to. With that, you're gonna wanna use a small wrench instead of the socket if you can't fit a socket. For this one, we're using a shallow 8 mil socket with a swivel extension, and we should be able to break that baby free. We have a little pry tab on the back here that we're going to use our flathead on. We're not prying on the sealing surface, we're just prying on the side of the pan and the block, breaking the old seal. And there we have it, my good people. Our oil pan is down. We're going to bring this over to the workbench in just a minute, clean it up, get all the old gasket material off, come back here, clean up the bottom of the block, get the old gasket material off as well, and then we'll talk about gluing it back on. Right now I'm just going to peel off the bigger parts of the old gasket that's on here, and then we'll come back and scrape off the rest. I'm just going to use a plastic scraper to get most of the bigger stuff off, and then from there we'll go back with a Scotch-Brite pad just to get any of the small residue bits off. If you're going to use a razor blade, just be super careful. You don't want to cut the sealing surface of the block here, otherwise that'll allow for leaks. So just keep that in mind. Try to stay away from the metal blades. Use a Scotch pad instead, or a plastic razor blade. That will be a lot easier and more forgiving to work with. Use our dipstick, which we're going to remove before we install the pan once more, just so that we don't accidentally risk getting any sealant on the dipstick or getting it in our way. Probably would have been a good idea to remove it at the very beginning, my good people. Don't do as I do, but do as I say. And just pull that off. If you're following along before doing this job, make sure you pull that out at the beginning. I'm gonna give the edge one last good wipe with some brake clean to make sure it's nice and good for the sealant and or gasket, depending on what you were gonna use. It'll also show us if we missed any spots. And then we'll still check it one more time when we go to install everything, just so that we know it's nice and clean in case anything drips down from the block. Over on the pan, we're doing the same process, my good people, scraping off the main residue from the old gasket that was on here, or RTV. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to try this Mercedes gasket remover on the car. And, you know, it's not perfect. You know, it's not designed for this type of material. I'm sure the Mercedes-Benz glue on the newer M270s and 274s and all that is a little bit different, but it definitely helps soften up the old RTV that's on here, which makes it a little bit easier to remove. So we're gonna work our way around, clean the surface up really, really nicely, get it nice and clean for our fresh RTV. We'll wipe down the inside of the pan as well and make sure it's spotless and decontaminated. And then we'll get ready to apply some fresh RTV and bring this baby back up under the N14. Now the goal here when we're doing this is not to take off the paint on the pan. Now obviously, my good people, you and I have eyes. We see that this car is a little bit worse for wear. This has obviously been done before. It's covered in RTV, uneven RTV, so the damage has been done. But if your pan's in nice, good shape, then, you know, use the chemicals, use the plastic scrapers, and then if you need to, go in with the Scotch-Brite pad, a fine one, just nice and gently. Again, not working to take off the paint, just the old gasket residue. All right, we got this pan looking like we could serve a nice meal in here, nice and clean. So we're gonna keep it like that. We're gonna get one last final pass of brake clean on there and do the same thing on the engine block. And then we're gonna dab this up with some Ultra Black Permatex RTV and bring it back over to the N14. All right, my good people, we're gonna take our Ultra Black, get this fed onto the car. See if we can use this tip for once. Usually I do this by hand with my finger, but we have a new unopened tip. So we'll see if that'll give us the nice bead that we're looking for. Now I'm just gonna spread the gasket maker evenly. That way we don't have a crazy ridge and we don't have it going in the direction that we don't want it to, aka the middle or I mean the inside of the pan itself. So we don't want any RTV going into the pan, which will then clog up our oil pickup, turning us into some BRZ stuff here, which we are trying to avoid. All right, my good people, with that, we're gonna head back over to the N12, get this fed in, get the hardware started by hand, and then we'll torque everything down nice and nice. Now we're gonna feed our pan back in, my good people, kind of keying it in a way where it's gonna go above our manifold or downpipe, so we don't A, mess up our freshly done seal on the pan itself, and B, contaminated with any of the oil dripping down. Now we're gonna get the rest fed in, my good people. Once we have all 16 8mm bolts in, we're gonna torque them down to 12 Newton meters. All right, my good people, at this point, our pan is completely installed, RTV'd in, everything's nice and torqued down. We're gonna leave this to beat for as long as possible, which for us will be about till 3 o'clock tomorrow, so an even 24 hours before we put any oil back in it. But from there, we're gonna go ahead and put our exhaust back on and basically wrap up everything underneath the car So I'm gonna go get some new hangers from the warehouse. We'll show you how to install those and we'll go from there. All right, I'm gonna pop these 2 old hangers off using the exact same tool, doing basically what we did on the exhaust side of things. Just this is on the subframe. Get these old broken hangers off. 2 old hangers are out. Now we're gonna take our new ones and pop them on. I like to put a little bit of dielectric grease on the openings just to help lube them on when they go on. Makes it a little bit easier. It's not gonna deteriorate the rubber. So that's usually my go-to. Pop these babies through. All right. Now we can take our new exhaust hanger and either place it on the downpipe or the exhaust side of things, whatever you like. We're gonna go ahead and place ours right here. Exhaust clamp is on. I'm gonna get that 16mm nut just gently loose and started, okay? Now with the clamp in place, we're gonna go ahead and bring over our pipe, snug that up, hang it up first, then snug it up, and then we're good. All right, now with that, let's go ahead and get our clamp situated up front. All right, my good people. For those of you with an eagle eye, or those of you that know your R56s very well, you will notice that we did not have a stiffening plate back here to remove. If your car still has that, which I really hope it does, it's gonna be located right here in the center, and it's held on by 6 10mm bolts. So if you're ready to remove that, don't forget to put it back in. For us, we're gonna move on with this car. We're gonna let it sit for 24 hours before we fill it up with oil. So we'll pick it back up tomorrow and put some oil in it. All right, my good people, it's been an almost full 24 hours. It is the next day. Our car is nice and cured up. We're gonna go ahead and throw our filter back in. Again, if you're not replacing the oil filter, maybe you just did an oil change and your filter's still good, then don't worry about the step. If you wanna learn a full step-by-step on how to do an oil change on the R56S chassis, we have a DIY, which we will link in the description below. But for us, we're just gonna go ahead and button up this filter first. And don't forget to put your 8mm bolt back in. That holds the expansion tank in place, which ours is missing, but we'll replace that later on. Moving on to the fill. The funnel is probably the one thing I forgot to mention to grab, my good people. I know, you know, it's very important to fill it back up with oil after the DIY, but you already knew you needed the funnel, all right? So don't come at me telling me, Mike, I didn't get a funnel. Now I can't finish this job. The capacity for the N14 is 4.8 liters of oil. Now we did have the pan out, we had the filter out. We're gonna throw in all 5. We're gonna be just fine on this car. It's probably gonna burn most of it anyways, but just keep that in mind. 4.8 liters is your standard fill if maybe you're just doing an oil change and you stumbled upon this before our oil change video. And don't forget, my good people, you also have the mileage interval stickers on the 5-liter liquid moly jugs, so you can write down the next time you need to do an oil change. But with that, my good people, we're gonna go ahead and button this baby up. We're gonna get our oil fill cap back on. And now that is gonna conclude this DIY for today. Overall, not a total nightmare of a job on the R56. Probably the biggest thing to remove being the exhaust, but once you get that out of your way, everything else is pretty easy to access. Again, the swivel socket being, or swivel adapter, being very critical for the 8mm bolts on the oil pan. And again, sometimes on the N12, you might need a wrench as well, but once you get that one out, the rest are super easy to get to. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.